afternoon and welcome to Untapped, your weekly dose of everything business. That is the new, the impactful, and the trendy right here at Daystar TV. I am your host, Samuel Ngima. On today's episode of Untapped, we'll be talking about takeover, but we'll be looking at it from a different lens. That is, we'll be viewing somebody who was transitioned into the tech industry from another industry. And with us in studio is a guest who is actually a senior software engineer. He will give us more information on the tech world. So keep it untapped. Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Meshach, and I'm a software engineer based out of Nairobi.
Yes. Meshach, being a software engineer, what does your line of work actually entail doing?
So my line of work entails bringing to life ideas in form of what people can interact with. That could be websites, the apps that people have on their phones, production lines for food processing companies, manufacturing companies. Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into development of software. Yeah.
How did you transition, how did you get into software engineering actually?
So for me, it's been a combination of learning through open source material already available to us, what we call open source material, that is not paid for. That's YouTube, free courses on Udemy, some purchased. And also, I had a period where I sat in some computer science classes. Yes, and then eventually applied to a couple of roles, and got my entry point into the industry.
You've always been passionate about the internet and technology.
Yes. For me, I think the biggest thing was the interaction on, especially with the advent of smartphones, where we would have games loaded onto the phones. So that piqued my interest. Like, how do these people actually load apps? Back then, we used to call them just everything was an app. So how would they load WhatsApp? How would they load Instagram onto a device that I can actually interact with? And how would I communicate with someone across the globe? Yeah, so it was out of an interest from what I was seeing happening around me.
All of this stemmed from campus or back in high school?
This was majorly from high school, because that's when I started. I got introduced to programming. So I started writing code in third form. That's when the formal, the way the syllabus is set in Kenya, you get introduced to programming languages in third form. Yeah.
That is after you've chosen what you're specializing in back in high school, right?
Yes.
So you did computer in high school, and then transitioned into what you're doing right now?
No. So I did computer in high school, but then there was a slight break. And by slight break, I mean, so the way the education system in Kenya is set, so after your high school finals, you get placed into university courses. So for me, I happened to have been placed in medicine. So I was called to med school to do a bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery. But then, so when I got to med school, still remember I wanted to do something along the lines of computer science. So I started sitting in on some of the computer science classes at university. But then somewhere along second year, it became really intense for me. So I had to choose one. So I ended up trying to follow the channels that had been put in place. That involves having an interfaculty transfer. Went to the extent of having an inter-university transfer from the university that I was doing medicine. But that I was met with frustrations on that. So I decided, since I'd already gotten some footing in the industry, in a way, through working on projects, attending local community meetups, I decided I was going to just leave med school altogether and focus.
Great.
Yeah.
At that moment, you were like, I'm done with med school, I will venture into something else.
Yes.
Was this something you had discussed with someone prior to you making the decision?
The only person I discussed it with was, we were with him in high school, and then we joined med school together. Though right now he's also doing computer science. And that he's the only person I told that, I don't think this is working out for me. I need to leave. Yeah.
Wow. That is actually very eye-opening. Somebody who decides to leave something that is seen as the creme de la creme by most, or if I might say everyone in our older generation, even our generation. So we'll go to a short commercial break, and then we'll come back to the show. So keep it Untapped. Welcome back to Untapped, where we're talking about transitioning from one field to another. Our guest in studio, Meshak Mwaura, as we've known, moved from something that all of us would have loved to do, not sure, medicine, to a more glamorous or cool career that is the tech field. So, Meshak, what were the biggest challenges you faced while transitioning?
So I think the biggest one, of course, was the backlash from friends and family. And that was immediately after. And the backlash was not because I was transitioning into the tech space, but because I was leaving the medicine profession. The challenges within the tech space was, and still is, the biggest one is imposter syndrome. That constant feeling of, you're not enough, you're not qualified enough to work in the profession. But how we supplement this is by, for me, I look at it as a positive because that tells me that there's a particular field that I need to read up on and ramp my skills on. So for me, I think I've worked towards turning the imposter syndrome into one of my strengths. When I feel like there's a concept I don't really fully understand, I will immerse myself or even consult in order to to cement the fact that, especially on my role where I have other people who ideally in a stereotypic environment would be considered more qualified than me, I need to cement the fact that, I'm the team lead, and the reason as to why I'm a team lead is not because I have been here longer, but because I have this to offer.
Yeah. Would you ever consider going to school and adding or having that degree on your field?
Yes. For those of you that are still in school, please stick to school. There's a lot that comes with being in school, right? So there are things you're not taught by life, but you're taught in school. That I tend to say this: guys who've graduated with computer science degrees or related degrees make the best managers, but not the best technical people. So if you want to focus, if you want your career to focus towards the management side of things, then computer science is right for you. But if you want to be a technical person in the field, then there's a technical approach to it, even while still being in school. Building out projects, because school is heavily theoretical, and there's a huge disconnect between what we currently do in the industry versus what is taught in school. As I mentioned before, so in high school, the first programming language I was introduced to was Pascal. The number of systems that's currently run on Pascal are very few, So there's a disconnect between what school teaches versus what is actually practiced in the profession.
Talking about the profession itself, what are the emerging trends in the social, in your field of study that people need to look out for?
So I'd say right now it's the best time to get into the tech space, if at all anyone out there wants to get into the tech space, because initially we only had, systems, people who build software. But right now it's diversified to a point where you have people like UI, UX designers, you have project managers, it's been stratified into fields like front-end engineering, back-end engineering, system design, DevOps. So it's up to you to just look at, okay, so what are you good at? If you're strong analytically, then something like back-end development or system design and architecture would be best suited for you. If you're a creative, someone who is visual, then design or front-end development. So front-end developers are basically the people who, anytime you're on an app interacting with it, you don't care about what happens in the behind the scenes. Like when you click on a login button, you don't care what happens behind the scenes. Because for me, I would care because there are things like sessions we need to store. How do we know that Meshak had already logged in when he came to the app? How do we know that this cart was populated by Meshak? There's something in his cart. So for you, if you're a visual person, you'd basically consider what the end user uses, like the interface that is front-facing to the user. Yeah.
A lot of youth or people who are into tech seem to believe that there's a lot of money in this space. What would you say to such?
There is money. That's not a lie. There is money, but It's not all glamorous. This is what I tell people. If you're joining the profession because of the money, you'll end up being frustrated. And I know that's contradicting given that I've just said there's money. The fact that there's money, that means there's a lot that goes also into getting the money. You'll work longer hours. I'm sure you've probably heard of jokes where we will be up all night dealing with bugs. Bugs are basically system defects, and it can take a toll on you mentally if you're not careful. So, as much as there's money, let it not be the motivating factor for you to get in. The motivation for you should be, of course, like anytime I go into an interview and they ask me why I want the job, I need to pay my bills at the end of the day. But beyond that, there's the aspect of, okay, so if it's a company like Jumia, are we offering e-commerce solutions that are accessible to a multitude of users? And what goes on behind the engineering aspect of it? Because as an end user for you, you'll just go into your browser, search Jumia, you won't care what happens behind the scenes. But for me, I'll be like, okay, so I need to ensure that this system has a high latency, meaning anytime you go onto your browser and type jumia.com, it should always be accessible. So that's where someone like a DevOps engineer comes in. A DevOps engineer will ensure that we have this system replicated across different clusters. What someone in Nigeria is accessing from jumia.com, the rate at which you're accessing it is not the same rate you're going to access it here if the servers are in a different country. So there's what we call a CDN network. So there's a lot that goes on behind this profession. So don't just come to it because of money, because there's a lot of learning. We learn every single day. Things change. As I mentioned in the past, Pascal was the hottest programming language. Right now, it's changed. There are a couple of new programming languages that are faster and effective. Yeah.
You've spoken of Jumia, which is an international company. I'm not sure. Are you willing to share what the companies or whom you've worked with here in Kenya, and how can somebody getting into the same space, how can they put themselves in a strategic position to actually get the work, whether be it remote or abroad?
So I'd say if there's one industry where it's easy for your skills to get noticed, it's in this profession. And I'll explain why that is. So I've worked with a couple of companies. I've worked with the likes of Safaricom, DT1. I've worked indirectly with AWS. I've worked with, there are a couple of companies that I've worked with. And the difference is for you to get noticed, put everything you're working on, have a portfolio. So we call it a portfolio. So there is a repository, you can think of it as a container of what you've done. So we call it a repository. So this is where you put all your projects. So as a recruiter, when I come onto your GitHub profile or GitLab, I will check, okay, so how does Meshach write his code? Okay, so is he following? So there was what we call best practices. And then there's also just a portfolio of the projects that you've worked on. So yeah, make it known. I tend to tell people, be vocal on the socials. And that's where you'll find most engineers and developers on Twitter, making lots of noise about what they're working on. Also, keep your LinkedIn up to date, right? Invest in your LinkedIn, take skills. There are technical skills you can actually take as a software engineer on LinkedIn to help recruiters notice you more. And make noise on socials. Because, I mean, how else will I know what you're working on if I don't get to hear it from someone? Yeah.
To bring it more local here, there's an organization called Nairobits up here at Nairobi Garage. And I've visited the area. There's a friend of mine who works there, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the basic idea is they take people from underprivileged societies and try to give them the tech skills that they can use to help or better their lives. Is there something that the government can do, not an NGO, to try and take up this space? Because a lot of people are into tech, especially in Kenya. The internet growth is really huge and growing fast. What can the government do?
So this is the thing. Most people don't actually know this, but companies like Microsoft, the government subsidize some certain units and courses, like training courses. So if you go onto Google has something called Google Developer Clubs, whereby university students can they get mentorship from Google engineers. Microsoft has what we call Microsoft Student Partners. So they partner with universities and have chapters within the universities for students who want to delve into their careers. And some of them actually get absorbed. I know a couple of people who've gotten absorbed into in different capacities as program managers or software engineers. So the government is actually putting in the work. Right now, there's, especially after, this whole discussion of big tech coming into Africa, we have Twitter opening up offices in Ghana, we have Microsoft already here, we have Google, AWS is already here. IBM has been here for the longest. So it's just a discussion of, for people like us who got introduction to programming in high school, how can this be introduced to at a lower level? And that's why you have a new curriculum. Actually, there's a new curriculum that has been rolled out for young kids with the current curriculum that is running. And I think that will help a great deal here.
Just sorry to cut you short. The curriculum you're talking about, this is separate from the CVC curriculum that the government rolled out.
Yes.
It's for the tech. It's specifically for tech products.
Yes. So if a kid, if they notice that a kid wants to venture into tech, it's introduced to them at an early age. Yeah.
To you as a Kenyan, what are the biggest impacts you've faced here locally working in the tech space?
One, local tech companies don't appreciate talent. That's one thing I can say without fear of contradiction. So we have devs being paid 80,000 for a whole department's work. So this is a guy who's handled as a front-end engineer, back-end engineer, systems design engineer. And there's a lot of haggling that goes on with skills, right? So, and then there's also not proper structure with especially lots of local companies. And also there are a lot of people who will claim to do something that they can't do. And this is on the side of software engineers. Like, I'll come to you and tell you, okay, so I can build you a system that can be the next Facebook. And ideally, that's a hoax, because it didn't take, Mark and the team a week or two to build Facebook. There is a lot that goes into designing a proper system. And then I'll overquote my whatever it is that I'm offering to give. So there's a serious deficit in finding the proper talent to work for local companies, and local companies also not compensating. And that's why you saw what happened with Safaricom. Sorry to mention, but when Microsoft came in, there was a huge brain drain from Safaricom and local companies to Microsoft, because Microsoft will put in an offer for you, and it's an offer you can't refuse at the end of the day. And I don't know whether Safaricom or the other local companies can match up. Yeah, but they are matching up right now, because now it's clear that now that Google is here, also, it's still going to continue unless something changes.
All right. Just to wrap it up, now that you're already established, did you mend the fences with your family about switching from medical to tech, or everything is cool right now?
I did. Actually, most of them are currently, most of them have actually now transitioned into tech. Very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is nice. And I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you.
Being able to share your line of work with us, it's something that I hope will open more doors for people out there. You can venture into the tech world as our guest here has and make it work.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure the pay helps to soften everything at home.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. That was Untapped. We had our guest in studio today, and I hope everything that he has shared will help you in your career paths. Until next time, keep it untapped.